The year is 1961. The film opens in a bustling Philadelphia department store, where a woman unexpectedly goes into labor and gives birth to a baby boy. She names him Elijah. By sheer luck, a doctor happens to be nearby and rushes to assist. He carefully takes the newborn into his arms, but his expression quickly shifts from joy to concern. With a sad tone, he asks if the baby was dropped. Confused and anxious, the mother and those gathered around her assure him no such accident occurred. The doctor then delivers the heartbreaking news that Elijah is born with broken arms and legs due to a rare condition that makes his bones incredibly brittle. In the present day, David Dunn is traveling from New York to Philadelphia by train. As the journey progresses, the engine noise grows increasingly loud, and the train accelerates beyond its safe limits. Panic spreads among the passengers, creating a tense and chaotic atmosphere. David suddenly finds himself waking up in an emergency room. A doctor stands by his side, asking him basic medical questions to assess his condition. The doctor then inquires about the location of David's seat on the train. David responds that he was seated by the window in the passenger car. The doctor's expression shifts. He informs David that the train had derailed, resulting in a catastrophic accident. Miraculously, David was the only survivor. As if defying all logic and medical understanding, David arises from the wreckage without a single broken bone, wound, or even a scratch on his body. When he exits the emergency room, he is greeted by the tearful embrace of his wife and son, who are overwhelmed with relief. The people around them, including hospital staff, stare at David in awe, regarding him as an anomaly. This living miracle walked away unharmed from a disaster. At home, David's wife, Audrey, inquires about his job interview in New York. He admits he didn't get the position, but intends to move there. The strain in their marriage is evident as they sleep in separate rooms, a sign of their ongoing marriage problems. After attending the memorial service for the East Rail train accident victims, David discovers an envelope on his car's windshield. The paper inside is embossed with the words "Limited Edition." Inside is a single sentence: "How many days of your life have you been sick?" Confused, David returns to his job as a security guard at a university football stadium. He approaches his supervisor and asks for a record of his sick days. The supervisor, aware of his recent train accident, is impressed and grants David a $40 raise, confirming that David has never taken a sick day. At home, David asks Audrey when she last remembers him being sick. She pauses and admits she can't recall a single day. Flashback to West Philadelphia. A young Elijah Prince sits in front of the TV with a fractured arm. His mother encourages him to go outside, but Elijah, afraid of further injury, resists. He is cruelly nicknamed Mr. Glass at school because of his condition. His mother, understanding his fears, tells him that while he cannot change his fragile condition, he cannot spend his life in fear and isolation. She presents him with a gift, but sets a challenge. He must retrieve it from the bench across the street to get it. With her encouragement, Elijah crosses the street and sits on the bench, opening the gift wrapped in purple paper. Inside, he finds a comic book. His mother promises to place a new comic on the bench each time he goes outside, encouraging him to face the world despite his fears. In the present day, David and his son Joseph visit the limited edition art gallery. They meet the owner, Elijah Prince, who sent David the mysterious letter. During their conversation, David mentions that he has never been sick or injured. However, Joseph recalls a car accident in college that ended his father's football career. Elijah, who has dedicated his life to studying comic books, believes that superhero narratives are inspired by true events, though commercialized and covered up with cartoons. Elijah explains his condition, osteogenesis imperfecta, which results in extremely breakable bones. He reveals that he has long believed there must be someone at the opposite end of the spectrum, someone with extraordinary strength and resilience, destined to protect others. He sees David as this individual. Skeptically, David suspects that Elijah might be attempting to exploit him for financial gain. The envelope planted a sense of hope in David, encouraging him to look for a solution, even though he found Elijah Prince's story hard to believe. That night, he scoped old newspaper clippings detailing his high school football career. and the accident that ended it. Audrey and David had a heartfelt conversation about their fractured relationship. She expressed her desire to work on their marriage again, adding how grateful she was that he survived the car crash. Elijah visited David at the stadium, using a glass cane for support. He found it fascinating that David had chosen a profession centered around protection and security. As they walked around the stadium, David had a sudden intuition that a man wearing a camouflage jacket was carrying a gun. Acting on his suspicion, David began searching the crowd, causing the man to separate from the line and leave. Elijah then asked David if he possessed strong instincts, suggesting that what people consider superpowers in comics are simply exaggerated versions of instinct. David argued that he could be mistaken about the gun, but Elijah left the stadium determined to prove his theory. He followed the man, but as he closed the distance, Elijah fell down a staircase, shattering his glass cane and yelling in pain. At that moment, he caught a glimpse of a silver gun on the man, confirming David's suspicion. After work, David and his son Joseph go to the gym for a workout session. Joseph placed 250 pounds on the barbell, the most David had ever pressed. David prepared to lift, instructing Joseph to remove the weights if necessary. Instead, Joseph secretly added 20 more pounds. They continued to add more weight. By the end of the session, David astonishingly lifted 350 pounds. Due to his fall, Elijah was now confined to a wheelchair. He scheduled an appointment with Audrey, who was a physical therapist. During their session, Audrey humored Elijah's questions about how she met her husband David, and they engaged in a friendly chat. Elijah eventually steered the conversation towards David, revealing his discovery of David's unique condition. He passionately tried to present to Audrey the extraordinary qualities he saw in David, hoping she would begin to see him through his eyes. Meanwhile, David receives a distressing call from Joseph's school, informing him that his son has been hurt. He rushes to the school and meets with the old principal, who recalls a drowning incident from David's childhood, an incident David doesn't remember until now. Joseph explains that he got injured while trying to mimic his father, believing he has the same extraordinary abilities. While David shares the story of his childhood drowning incident, later that evening, as Audrey discusses Elijah's recent visit with David, Joseph stumbles upon his father's gun and bullets. Joseph threatens to shoot him in a misguided attempt to validate Elijah's theory that David is invulnerable. Audrey desperately tries to talk him down, while David shares the story of his childhood drowning incident to convince Joseph of his vulnerability. When Joseph remains unconvinced, David tells him that if he fires the gun, David will leave the family forever. The ultimatum finally persuades Joseph to lower the weapon. Determined to confront Elijah, David arranges a meeting where Elijah accuses him of faking his injury from the car accident to avoid a promising football career in favor of his marriage. David counters by recounting the pool incident from his childhood, effectively disproving Elijah's theory. They decide to end their communication, recognizing the need to move on from each other. David and Audrey go out on a date to restore their bad relationship. Upon returning home, they find a voicemail from Elijah. In the message, he acknowledges that while there may be opposite ends of the spectrum, they share a common weakness: water. The flashback reveals David saving Audrey from a car crash, with a person asking if they were hurt. Audrey had sustained leg injuries, but David remained silent, protecting his own well-being. In the present, David calls Elijah, confessing that he has never been injured. Determined to sharpen his instincts, David engages in a crowd, allowing people to brush past him. Each contact brings visions of their worst deeds, hit and runs, thefts, and molestations, overwhelming him with the darkness lurking within humanity. One evening, a maintenance man walks by, and David experiences a vision of the man breaking into a house and killing someone. Driven by his newfound sense of purpose, David follows the murderer on a rainy night to the crime scene. As he steps into the house, he sees flashes of the horrific crime. He discovers the victim's daughters handcuffed inside a closet. He helps them escape, but before he can free their mother, the attacker returns. The murderer attacks David, pushing him off a balcony into a pool, where he nearly drowns. Miraculously, the daughters he saved pulled him out of the water just in time. Fueled by determination, David re-enters the house and confronts the killer. After a fierce struggle, he manages to overpower and kill the murderer. With the danger finally eliminated, David unties the wife, ensuring the family's safety. The next scene shows David back home, hanging up his symbolic cape, his poncho, after a long night. He carefully carries his sleeping wife, Audrey, upstairs to their bedroom. As she lays down, she stirs awake and groggily asks, "What's wrong?" With a weary expression, David simply replies, "I had a bad dream." The following morning, while having breakfast with his family, David subtly slides the newspaper over to his son, Joseph. He places his finger to his lips, signaling him to stay quiet. The headline catches Joseph's eye. It tells the story of a mysterious hero who saved 2 girls. The accompanying illustration is an artist's rendition of the girl's description: a superhero-like figure with a hood and cape. Joseph looks up at his father with wide eyes, and David responds with a knowing smile and nod, silently confirming his son's suspicions. Later, David visits Elijah's art gallery, where a large gathering takes place for a special exhibition. Amidst the bustling crowd, Elijah, now in a wheelchair due to his fall, proudly welcomes David. They retreat to Elijah's back office to discuss recent events. Elijah expresses his pride in David's heroic actions, and they shake hands warmly. Suddenly, as their hands clasp, David experiences vivid and disturbing visions reminiscent of Christopher Walken's character in Stephen King's The Dead Zone. In quick succession, he sees Elijah setting a building ablaze, causing a plane to crash, and finally exiting the driver's compartment of the train that derailed. The horrifying realization hits David: Elijah is behind these catastrophes. Glancing around Elijah's office, David notices numerous newspaper clippings detailing disasters worldwide, piecing together a sinister puzzle. Elijah is the mastermind orchestrating these tragedies, staging them for his own twisted purposes. Staggering back in shock, David looks at Elijah, who now, sitting in his wheelchair, resembles Professor X from the X-Men. With a sinister gleam in his eyes, Elijah declares, "They call me Mr. Glass." The scene fades to black, and a message appears on the screen. David contacted the authorities, and Elijah is now confined to an institution for the criminally insane. And with that, the movie ends. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.